Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. I'm a men's coach. I work with men in the realm of dating, relationships, intimacy, and masculinity. But really the core of my work is helping men live more full lives, live more life with passion, enjoyment, and more connection. Especially something I really focus on is more connection, both with partners or friends or in their work, but also with themselves. Because, when we can feel deeply connected to ourselves, we can be more present, we can enjoy more life. We can enjoy more of what life has to offer as well. So today's episode is with a friend of mine, a wonderful man, Matt Gunn, who I've had the absolute pleasure of working alongside with Men Without Masks. There's a retreat that I help facilitate on, that Matt regularly helps out on. And this is a beautiful conversation. He's a transpersonal psychotherapist. He's a men's coach. He's an embodiment coach. He's a breathwork healer. He does trauma release breathwork. He does a lot of different things. He's trauma informed, but he has a really wonderful way, a really gentle way about him. It's like for me, it's like a big brother that I never really had. Someone you can go to for wisdom and guidance, but also has such a loving and safe way about him as well. So in this episode, we talk about transpersonal psychotherapy and what that is, and what his practice looks like as a psychotherapist. And I feel that he has a quite unique way of working. He blends in breath work and body work and the words describe me, and embodiment as well. He really blends all of those things into his practice in a really beautiful way. And I've had the pleasure of seeing him at work, running breath work. I've received his breath work as well, which is really, really deep and really moving. So we really get into that and the body and what is embodiment and why is it so important, and why it helps to release trauma and how we can create safety in ourselves, in our own bodies as well. We talk about, how he moves, like I said, in his practice, the work he does, and we talk a lot about purpose as well. We get into the beginning of this is a lot about purpose. And it's a really important conversation because purpose is often something really difficult for men to come to. But he brings a really beautiful way to how he found his purpose. And it's something that I'm sure many of you resonate with. If you're struggling to find purpose, or you think you've got your purpose, or you're not sure, the first kind of half an hour of this conversation will be really, really important for you, especially because it's really, really gold. And we actually share both our stories of how we came to do the work that we do, our purposes and how they came about. So that's a really important part of the conversation. And also we talk about anger and, letting go of anger and processing anger as well, and the importance of doing so, and why as men we really struggle with anger. So there's a lot in this episode, and it's a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed talking to Matt, and I hope you're going to enjoy it too, which I'm sure you will. I'm just going to let you know that I have a 8-week relationship program coming up with also my partner. That's been running in September and October, where we're going to take people through the ins and outs of how to relate confidently and how to relate in relationship and even in dating from a place of confidence, but also how we can create actual connection how we can communicate in ways that stop us getting into conflict, how we can communicate in ways that creates connection, how can we use masculine and feminine polarity to our benefit to create more attraction, more sexual polarity inside a relationship. And there's going to be a lot more than that. There's 8 weeks. There is a link in the show notes for you to go and delve deeper into what's inside of that program. If there's something you're interested in, please, jump in, have a click through. Or if you want to talk to me about it, find me on Instagram. You can find me, DM me and talk to me about it. All the good stuff in there. I think that's enough for announcements. We're going to just get straight into the episode. Thank you. Back again, ladies and gentlemen, with another episode. And today I have a wonderful man I've had the absolute pleasure to spend a good amount of time with and talk and work with. It's a man who I first met last year. And I was, he was facilitating a retreat that I was on. And lucky enough, not too long ago, I got to work alongside him and see him work his magic. And he has a wonderful manner. I just feel so safe and so gentle, but yet held so strongly in his presence. Today I have Matt Gunn. He's a psychotherapist and a trauma release breathwork practitioner, and he works with Craig and the team over at Men Without Masks. How are you doing, Matt?
Really good. Yeah, really good. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
No, thank you. When we were over at Men Without Masks, we had an evening where we chatted, and I remember the last day in particular, the breathwork session you ran in the morning, which was really beautiful. You got like 20 odd men in a room and he's guiding everybody into their bodies. It was a really incredible journey. But it was when I think we were talking a few days before, and I know that you're a psychotherapist from when we first met. And I hadn't realized that you really weaved all the breathwork and the embodiment into your practice, which is incredible. And I think is incredibly unique, right, in the world. But before we get into all that, because that's really juicy stuff that I'm sure people are very interested in, I'm interested in you and your journey to do this work that you do now. Like, what was your journey that brought you to where you are now?
I think it probably all kind of started off around losing my mum when I was 12 years of age. So up to that point, I kind of like had a relatively kind of normal childhood. And around, I think maybe 10 or 11, discovered that my mum was ill. And we'd kind of like had a family conversation. And she sat us down and told us that she was suffering with cancer and that she was going to embark on a journey of chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And there was definitely a sort of sense that everything was going to be okay though. Like that we'd had this conversation and that the C word was really terrifying, but there was just this hope of it's fine, we'll get through it and everything will be okay. And I remember kind of like feeling this real fear, because that word to me just meant death. Like it was kind of just really scary connotations. But I really believed her, like she just had such hope. And so she suffered and struggled probably for about 18 months. And I really remember being kind of in and out of her process of just being a normal 12-year-old doing his thing, and also kind of being aware that she was ill and the changes that were kind of taking place. And I just remember, I think my brother and I had been away staying with some friends, and we came back and we went to see her in the hospital, and I just knew that she was really suffering and really ill. She'd lost a lot of weight, and she couldn't speak to me. She was in such a bad way that she had fluid on her lungs, and she was unable to speak. And I just kind of felt this real dread, and she passed away later that day. And it was almost as if like my life up to that point all kind of just froze at that point, and I did emotionally, and just had a really challenging few years after that, kind of growing up with my dad and growing up with my brother, and in a space where I guess typically men don't really talk about stuff like that. Like we weren't good at discussing her at all. Like we never discussed her actually, and it was almost easier to not go there, and it very much became an elephant in the room, and grief was something that we just didn't know how to be with at all. And my dad kind of buried himself in work, and my brother kind of went on his own path, and I very much kind of went into myself and into a place of fear and worrying about what was going to happen next, and worrying about losing my dad and my brother, and very kind of like irrational, intrusive thinking. And I would say that the sort of teenage years and early 20s, I was really consumed with that, very consumed with fear and anxiety, and a sense of really not trusting the world at all, not trusting the universe was a friendly place in any way, shape or form. And I ended up in a few relationships, but they were generally unsuccessful because I was so clingy. Like I didn't realize at the time, but I was just desperately trying to hold on to any female love, like probably in some way trying to reconnect to my mum or fill that sort of hole in my heart. And kind of went that way for a while, feeling a bit lost, a bit kind of uncertain, different jobs, just couldn't really stick at anything. Very disconnected from my own body, just very strategic, always thinking, always in control, micromanaging everything. A pretty painful and lonely existence. And when I was in my mid-20s, I met my wife, Paula, and she had been in recovery from drugs and alcohol for about 10 years at that point. And she really kind of directly said to me, look, I really like you, and I think that we could, we've got a great chance of being, really happy together, but you really need to do some work on yourself. And it was like, wounded initially. Like, what do you mean? And yet there was a part of me that really knew that she was right. But I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what that looked like. I'd never even considered the question of how do you feel. I don't think anyone had actually genuinely ever asked me that and meant it. So she signed me up on a weekend workshop for men, the New Warrior Adventure with the Mankind Project, and I hated it. And I hated her, and it was just like, it was my worst nightmare. It was loads of men, which I wasn't at that time in my life particularly trusting towards or feeling much I always felt a bit like I didn't really know how to kind of be in the mix with men, like I didn't feel particularly, I wasn't a big drinker, I wasn't into sport, and I always felt a bit like, I don't really know where I fit here. And I was generally at that time very kind of felt much safer and more connected to women. And so the thought of being with a load of men for 3 days and speaking about feelings and sharing and being honest was just like, no. So I hated it, and I had an opportunity to learn something about men. Like I experienced men there that were genuinely caring and that genuinely listened and I could relate to, and that understood me. And it was a big shift for me. But I went home with that kind of never again energy, like don't ever ask me again because it's not happening. And then I don't know how she did it, but 6 months later she said, I've signed you up for something else now. And this was another weekend workshop, but it was a mixed workshop. It was called The Awakening. And it was organised by a Canadian company called Clear Mind. And I kind of half knew what to expect this time. And I was a little bit more courageous. I maybe said 2 words rather than none. And I remember leaving thinking, God, I wish I'd shown up. Like, some of the people there were so courageous, and they spoke and they shared and they had these cathartic experiences. And I left there thinking, God, I really wanted that. I wanted the connection that they experienced, but I was so scared of it. And I was in that space of hearing some of their stories and thinking that mine was in no way as profoundly powerful as theirs. So I kind of kept my mouth shut, but really regretted that. And off the back of that, decided that I was ready to step into therapy, and with one of the facilitators that was there. So I embarked on a journey of psychotherapy with a man who was probably similar to my dad's age, slightly older, which was powerful and triggering, and tons of initial projection from me on him, which must have been really tough now I come to think about it. But it was a really beautiful journey for me of understanding grief and understanding love and loss and fear and anxiety. And he just really helped me to understand my own pain, which was such a gift. And he had, from quite early on, he'd always sort of half suggested that maybe I could one day be a psychotherapist, and maybe he kind of saw me working with men. And I was in the space of, not me, no, not interested, don't want to do it. And I don't know what it was, whether he was particularly persuasive or there was something in him that I really, really admired. But eventually I signed up, and before I knew it, I was embarking on a 4-year journey to becoming a psychotherapist, which was really, really enlightening. It was a fantastic program where I just had that exposure to doing work on myself and with other people. There was an incredible container that was created. It was very experiential. The first year was about me. Second year was about me in relationship. Third year was about me in groups and leading groups. And fourth year was kind of piecing it all together. And yeah, it was so transformational. Like I up to that point, I'd felt really lost as a man in the world, like so lost. And halfway through, there was a teacher called Maria, and she saw something in me and reflected it back to me, which no one had ever said before, and I believed her. And she said that I could see you working with men, and I could see you doing this work. And for the first time ever, yeah, I just genuinely believed that to be true. And I felt so inspired and so on purpose. And that was a massive defining moment in my life. And it just kind of opened such potential and possibility up for me, and affected how I was in the world, how I was as a husband, as a father, as a friend. And it was really, really beautiful.
I really hear there it's for your own journey. But the thing that really sticks in my mind is like really being seen by people, by 2 people, you know, by your therapist and then later Maria, really being seen, like 2 people seeing beyond maybe what you often were showing the world at that point, and seeing something in you that you've maybe not really seen for yourself is quite a unique experience, you know, because it almost jolts us. You know, I've had this experience with people before where they say something to me like, this is what you're meant to be doing. And you're like, no. There's a resistance, but there's also like a curiosity of like, why do you see this in me? No one's ever seen, and for some of us, it's like, no one's ever seen anything in me. So what is it that you see? How did that feel for you to really be seen in those moments?
Initially, initially, not so much with Maria, but more with Dwayne, who was my therapist. Initially, it was mistrust. So I was like, what's in it for you? You know, like, because he worked for the organization that I was going to do my training with. And there was just a part of me that just thought it was a sales pitch. I was so guarded, and I wanted to believe him, and I so wanted like this kind of male blessing. And yet there was part of me that didn't trust it and wanted to kind of keep him here, and was, was really unsure of it. But I had to sort of process that and be with it, and kind of like let go of that projection that I kind of put on him, and put, you know, like I maybe thought that, well, people that do this work, they just do it because they're getting paid. And obviously now I have a much deeper appreciation of why people do this work. And to give him the benefit of the doubt would have meant really deepening my connection with him, really trusting him. And there was such a risk there. And really, it was only later on, actually, kind of like when I finished my course, that I actually had the opportunity to thank him and to really share how he shifted the trajectory of my life. Just by that, you know, because there was clearly a part of me that believed him, because that part of me signed the dotted line and started the course. But at the time, I couldn't receive his words. It was just like fully in person and in connection with him. And I think when I'd had that conversation with Maria, I was 2 years into the course, and I was softer, you know, like I'd slightly let the guard down. I was, you know, like I was much more connected to myself. And I don't know whether it was receiving it from a female. I don't know what it was, but it just landed in me, just divine timing. It landed right in my heart, and it was like a light bulb. It was like, yeah, I believe you. Like, I really, like, you're saying something really kind, and I believe you. And yeah, I was, I don't know, maybe late 20s by that point, and it was just, yeah, the first time I actually believed somebody's kindness and praise. You know, something that somebody saw in me, and it was just the biggest gift. And then I felt inspired to show her that I could do it. So there was that too, that came with it. And so, I don't know that she ever knows how impactful that sentence was, that few minutes of conversation that we had, that just allowed me to really believe in myself. It was really beautiful. And it was like, we speak a lot, don't we, in men's work about purpose. And I'm sure, like me, you've had countless conversations with men around their struggle to find purpose. And I know that certainly at that time, had she not shone a light on me and illuminated me, that I wouldn't have found it at that point. That all of the thinking and strategizing and trying to do it with a coach or a therapist, I needed someone to see something in me at that time that I couldn't see. So it was the most beautiful gift, just to be seen.
Yeah, I can really resonate with that from my own experience of my life. Like, I don't know, it is about men, and we struggle to be seen by other men, especially older men telling us something, like they see something. We just can't believe the words. We just can't grasp onto it. There's a mistrust. And, you know, even when we, you know, Men Without Masks not too long ago, it's almost like in the first few days, you kind of see the mistrust that men have for everybody else, for all other men, that we kind of, I don't know, we learn through our childhoods and our experiences with other men. And, you know, I can't let my guard down, because if he's saying something nice to me, there must be some ulterior thing. He must be trying to take something from me, sell me something, or he's going to maybe use this against me at some point if I say something nice. And I definitely say from my own experience that, you know, I had a coach probably about 5 years ago now. And during one of the sessions, he was going through one of his processes, and he kind of came out of a meditation that we did. And he was like, he's going to share first. And he was like, what I see you doing is guiding men in the work, guiding men to where you are, but they're going to be much further back on their journey than you are at that point. And I was like, nah, fuck off. I'm not doing it. I don't want it. I don't want to be a coach. I don't want to do that. And I just kept going to him. I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And he just turned to me and said, it's not really a choice for you. You know, this is what's in your timeline. Whether you choose to take it up and when you choose to take it up, that is more of the question. And like you said there, I was like, so what is it? Does he want me to get on? Maybe this is his way of getting me to coach with him for longer, or get on his coaching program, or whatever it may be. And I was really resistant to it. But it's funny because when I look back, even years before, I had a boss when I worked in tech, and this was my first job. I would have been probably 22. And he said this to me. He goes to me, I was leaving the company there, and we went for dinner actually. And he said to me, don't get caught up in this, like doing the day-to-day work for too long. He's like, you're born to lead teams. That's what you should be doing. So that's what you should do. And I remember him saying that. And I, like you said there, I was like, I couldn't hear those words. In my head, I was like, he must be really mistaken. He doesn't know me that well. Like he just says, my story often when people say something nice is, they just say that to everybody. Mm-hmm. They just say it to everybody. And I kind of deflected it. And it wasn't until years later that I was managing a team of people, or someone actually, a boss at that time had actually asked me to lead a team of people in the team. And I did it for a few months. And the words that he said to me really came back to me. And I was like, he saw this 10, 12 years ago, but I just couldn't hear it. I couldn't accept this thing to be true about me because the beliefs I had about myself, you know. And it's amazing how so often people actually do believe in us and do direct us in ways, but we're just not able to hear it. We're not ready to accept that this beautiful thing could be true about ourselves.
Yeah, for sure. I think, and I also think there's a timing, isn't there? There's like a readiness. I think like when we're ready, then it finally lands. And I think that the whole piece in the puzzle around purpose just made sense for me, because also kind of like prior to kind of connecting with my purpose, everything was about like attachment-based relationship. Like as long as I'm safe within relationship, whether it was in my marriage, whether it was with friendships, then everything's okay. Like, but I need to feel okay in all of these places. And because I didn't have that clarity of purpose, I clung on really, probably unhealthily actually, to relationships of like, you know, almost like putting this pressure on of like, this has got to work, because if this doesn't work, I'm fucked. There's nothing in, you know, going for me outside of, you know, I guess like, unhealthy attached relationships. So when I could believe that I had a purpose, then all of that shifted. Like I didn't have these unhealthy expectations of people, of friendships, of my wife. Like it literally dissolved. And I think that's a really incredible, liberating experience to kind of go, I get it. Because again, like I'd read about purpose, I'd read, you know, David Dada, and I couldn't understand. I just couldn't relate to it. Like this thing that you talk about, this purpose, you want me to put this ahead of everything. And it just didn't feel right. It never felt right for me because I didn't understand it. And I just couldn't see. I almost felt like I wasn't worthy of a purpose that was that powerful. And I think kind of like when you feel that, there's just this like big sigh of relief. And like, you know, like, I get it now. I get that, you know, like, even if there's stuff going on, even if there's struggle or conflict or some sort of disconnection, I've still got this path and it's bigger than me. Like, it's so much bigger than I am. And that is so liberating and powerful.
Yeah, because in there, it's like before purpose was found, you were gaining meaning, all of your meaning about who you were in the world, your value to the world through relationships. It sounds like it's like, oh, who's Matt? Where does he get his value from? His value is in the relationship. So all your energy and all your focus went on to that, which creates, as you said, creates a lot of pressure for anyone you're in a relationship with, and means we kind of become. I call it just actually. I always think of it as Gollum in Lord of the Rings. The way he is with the ring, it's like I must have it. It becomes very tense, very stressed, very grabby about it. Whereas when your purpose was unfolded before you, it was like, oh, I don't have to be that way with those relationships, because my meaning is kind of, because I'm doing this thing, this purpose that's mine. There's meaning there. And no one can take that away from me. So I don't need to grip onto it in any way, because it's there and it will always be there, and it can't be taken away from me in any way. And it's bigger than me. It's bigger than this other person. So I can almost, it sounds like a level of kind of surrendering to the purpose and allowing yourself to follow that.
Yeah. And I didn't know who I was outside of relationship either. I didn't know who I was unless I was interacting with someone else. And that was a huge discovery of like, who am I? What do I? And I think like we all come to that big question, don't we? Maybe in our 30s, depending on who we are. But like for me, that was that, like, who am I outside of any relationship? I don't know. What do I want? What do I like? Like when I'm real and honest and authentic, I just didn't know how to answer those questions. And I think to have a focus of purpose just gave me that clarity and that space to ask those questions. And it's interesting because I'm sat here thinking, why are you talking about, like, I would normally hate to talk about purpose and fascinated about bodies and breath and trauma, but it's really interesting. Like there's something in it. There's really something powerful in this subject that eluded me for so many years. Like anything like that, if ever a therapist or a coach brought it up, I'd contract and I'd roll my eyes and it'd be like, I'm doing this again. And just didn't appreciate how potent it is. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm reframing for myself my own relationship with it.
And it's funny because it isn't necessarily where I thought we would go, but I feel like this is really important because in my work, quite a few people, they really struggle with purpose. And they find themselves either just meandering through a routine of life that they've been in that feels very joyless, or even some of my clients find themselves similar to what you're saying, like relationships are everything, getting all their meaning from relationships. So it causes some chaotic relationships. And now in this place you are now where you feel that your purpose is clear for you. When you work with men, how do you kind of frame it for them, especially the ones who are struggling to find purpose? Like, how do you frame it for them to start on that journey of finding that, uncovering it, or allowing it to unfold?
I think normally just giving a man the permission to make his purpose the discovery of his purpose. So it's kind of like, what would happen if you just gave yourself that space? That you didn't put this immense pressure that in this session, for example, we don't need to discover it. Because if we're forcing it just through you and I brainstorming, you're probably going to come up with something that you just plucked from your mind, or something that maybe you think I resonate with or I want to hear. But what if you spend the next 6 months, 12 months of your life just delving into yourself, delving into practices, delving into therapy, into breathwork, embodiment work, trauma work, just to give yourself that space. You know, like make that your purpose. Make your purpose reconnecting to you. Like come home to yourself for the next 12 months and then we can talk about your purpose. But don't rush it, and don't give yourself the pressure of thinking, I've got to do it within this, you know, like if I don't do it in this coaching block or in this therapy session, like I'm a failure. I should know it, because it's an organic process. And I think that you can cultivate that process by really just coming back to doing your work on yourself. And that sometimes maybe in a moment of stillness after a breathwork session or in a meditation, that you can actually start to like feel into your truth, like outside of the busyness of your brain and your programming and whatever unresolved stuff you bring into the present moment.
Basically, when we give ourselves some space, some mental space for it to arise, and also the space to try things, to try and fail. I see that as a big thing for a lot of men, this idea of failure and mistakes, wanting to get it right the first time, because in some strange world in our minds that's how we must always be operating, really can get in the way of having purpose and trying things out, and maybe even changing purpose as well. Like, that's something that not enough people talk about, that actually over time for a lot of people, their purpose might start off as, I don't know, women's work, and that might morph into helping businesses and morph into something else. And actually that is very normal for things to shift and change over time.
Yeah, I think it's a feeling as well. I think like rather than like a rational decision, I think it's a feeling, it's a knowing. And I think if you're in that space of, I think this is it, I think this feels right, I think this sounds right, to actually like feel that truth, that knowing, it's just in your core, it's in your body, you sit and you go, this is it. Like this, just like noticing your body open and respond, and your breath deepen, and you're like, this is it, this is the one. I think for me, it's a feeling.
And it would take giving yourself enough space to feel enough, and to be felt by others as well, for it to arise.
Yeah. I think that's like that intelligence, that embodied intelligence, is something that, like as men, we probably become quite disconnected and detached from. And like that was certainly my experience. So kind of like after becoming a psychotherapist and working in psychotherapy, I felt like I really understood. I understood my pain, other people's pain, what happened, why that happened, why you ended up with that person, why she did this and he did that. But what I was noticing was that me personally, I still felt often like shit. I still felt disconnected and fearful, but I understood it all. And there was just this disconnect or separation. And I was so disconnected from my own emotional intelligence. And I think that led me down into the sort of path of breath work, of body work, of movement and embodiment, because when I stepped into that, in addition to the awareness and understanding I gained from psychotherapy, I finally started to feel better. And I finally started to access emotional intelligence. So I would trust my body. Like, this is right, this feels right. Prior to that, I didn't go anywhere near my body because there was such pain there. So I couldn't I wouldn't know my truth if it hit me in the face, because I couldn't feel my body at all. And I think like that's a really important missing link, because again, all of the thinking about mission and purpose and life's path, in the absence of our heart and our gut, I just think we're going to struggle.
And I know this is a big part of your work, and we're going to get into the embodiment, the breath, but you touched upon, being a psychotherapist, and a lot of people, they go and see a therapist, and it's, sitting and talking endlessly for hours and hours, not at the same time, usually over the course of weeks, months, and years. And you work differently, from the conversations I know we've had. And I think actually maybe a good place to start is I know you're a transpersonal psychotherapist. It'd be great to get a small snippet of what that means as a type of therapy.
Yeah, I mean, it's also can be described as sort of spiritual psychology or spiritual psychotherapy. So where we're much more aware of what's out there and what's greater than us. So the kind of connection of other human beings and where we fit in the world and in this space. So who we are as a relational being, who we are within connection. And that's kind of really important for me. That's, to me, when it comes to healing, I think we really need to look at who we are in connection and who we are in relationship and how we feel in our own body. I think they're, for me, the two biggest kind of pieces in the puzzle of healing. So that was the psychotherapy that I was most kind of drawn to. It was just the sort of real focus on who we are within relationship. Because essentially that's where, as human beings, most of our pain is caused by relationship. And therefore most of our healing needs to happen within relationship and centered around relationship. So yeah, I was just really drawn to that. And I think after doing the awakening with Clear Mind and seeing the way that they work experientially, it's although there's a lot of talking involved, there's experience and process, and I just loved how they worked, and I loved how they made relationship so important. Like really more than just the words that we're sharing and how qualified we are as a psychotherapist. The first and most fundamental point is who we are together within relationship. So to create a relationship with our client, with the person that we sat with, is everything for me initially. It's just that, like, without that, there's nothing. And it's just really powerful then to sort of build from that, the depth of that relationship of essentially just two human beings sat with each other, sat alongside each other, speaking their truth. And then I think, adding the embodiment and adding the breath, it just brings a deeper level. Because then not only are we sat alongside one another, we're conscious of our breath. We're conscious of what's happening in our body as we're speaking. And that is just next level kind of like opportunity for transformation and healing.
I'm sure I read somewhere not too long ago that the relationship between patient and therapist, or client and therapist, I'm not sure the exact language, was actually the most important thing in terms of the client moving past whatever challenges, healing, whatever it may be in their life. And what I really heard in what you were saying there was like, it's safety. It's creating a level of safety between two human beings and really focusing on that relationship as a safe place to bring whatever there is. And like you said, bringing in the embodiment practices and the breath. So a question, not so much myself, but I'm sure the listeners, is why is the body so important when it comes to healing?
In my experience and in my learnings, like, our body is deeply impacted by whatever has happened or happens to us emotionally. So, we've all kind of heard the saying that our issues are in our tissues. Like that when something happens to us, it happens and our body responds as a result to it. So when we talk about trauma, whether it's a small T trauma, so like developmental trauma, or a large T trauma, such as witnessing a death or experiencing emotional or sexual abuse, we are impacted by it energetically at the level of our body. So in our brain and our brain's ability to be able to almost kind of disconnect from things and carry on. It's like we have this incredible ability as human beings to just focus or become distracted or bring our energy elsewhere and almost kind of move past, almost bypass the actual experience that we had in order to function and still be present within the world. Whereas our body holds the residue of whatever's happened to us. It energetically contracts against it, stores it within its cells, within its fascia, its structure. And as the title of the book suggests, like, our body keeps the score. the body keeps the score. And it really does. So any amount of kind of forgetting psychologically, our body doesn't forget. So what we then often do is we detach or disassociate. We become very disconnected from our physical body. You know, and whether that's like unconsciously through finding ways to distract, whether it's through addictions. We do. We almost kind of like build a brick wall between our neck and our lower body, and we just live in this space, in strategy, in the future, in our unresolved past. And we this body that we carry around is incredible for, it can operate functionally, but we don't live in it. Like, we don't access all of our deepest feelings. We don't access our intuition. It's because that's where our pain lives. There's so much teaching and speaking about being present, but no one's really saying, well, actually, it's really challenging to be present, because when we're truly present, we're present with all that is. We're present with all of the pain and all of the unresolved grief and anger and trauma that resides within us. So if you expect me to be truly present in this moment, I have to be with all of that. And so a lot of my work is learning to be with all of that and to befriend it and not judge it, and to cultivate an environment where we can move it through us, we can healthily discharge and express it.
Opposed to the normal tactics that we take, is the avoidance, the distraction, be that work or drink, drugs, partying, whatever it is. A lot of us are almost trained not to be in our bodies. We're trained to keep on going, find something else to do. And this really causes people a lot of ongoing pain through this avoidance of coming home. And as you said, coming back to the body can feel difficult. Becoming present can be difficult because you have to be with the pain that's there, that's occurred. So how do you, in your work, guide people to process through that pain so they can learn to be present with what is now?
Usually we start with talking. So we just start with me understanding their story, just developing safety and rapport within relationship. And I think so often people who like genuinely listen to us were so rare in our life kind of growing up. So just to kind of like develop that relationship through words. So I just make sure that I'm as physically present with the person as possible as they tell their story. And just so I can get a feel for who they are and what happened to them, and also an understanding of their kind of current process or dilemma. And then I, as quickly as possible, then, and gently as well, like there's no rush, but in my experience, like you said, I think at the beginning of the podcast, the more that we speak within therapy, in my experience, the more we kind of perpetuate the story and stay stuck in it. And I think we can become experts at telling our story, but yet being so disconnected from it. So it's illuminating for me to be able to hear somebody's story, but then support them to be able to find it and feel it in their body. So to work with what is present in the moment and just really, really gently touching into it initially. And so sometimes it can just be through closing our eyes, through connecting to our breath and just starting to feel, like, what do we notice in this moment? Like, what can we feel? And can we just feel it rather than needing to understand it or attach a story to it? Can we just actually feel what's present and then just be with it for a moment and track it? Like, there's nothing static within our body. So when we notice something and we actually bring our awareness to it, the incredible thing is that we notice that it's fluid and it moves. When we don't bring our awareness and when we avoid, that's where we stay stuck, because it's almost as if it's waiting to be known, waiting to be felt. And so, yeah, when we connect to what's called the felt sense, we just bring in our ability to feel something from the inside out without needing to put words to it or to understand it, to really bring all of our attention to it. We notice that it's fluid, we notice that it moves, and then we come out of it again, and we might speak about it for a bit. And then when we're ready, we then come back in again. And all of the time we're developing this relationship with parts of ourselves that we've actively been avoiding for years, but that have been energetically exhausting us because we've kind of we've contracted around it, against it, we've contained it within our body, which affects our ability to be present and to be open, affects our ability to move fluidly and freely because we're holding so much tension in our tissues. So when somebody can connect to their own body and just be with it for a moment and come back out again, come back into connection, back into relationship, feel safe, find some safety in their body and then come back in again, that's a really effective, gentle way to support somebody to come back into their body. And then we can deepen that by adding breath. We can deepen it further by adding body work, by adding sound, vocal expression, movement, like organic, non-linear, natural movement. Emotional expression by allowing people to open their throat, to speak, to express whatever kind of comes up for them. And then adding in periods of stillness and meditation where they can kind of integrate their experience. So that kind of like in a nutshell is how I start to introduce people back into their body.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost like, when you hear it, I'm sure some of the listeners, you hear it and you think, but what would that do? Feeling a bit and breathing a bit and moving a bit, it's just, I do those things all day, every day. And it's a bit like, I've been using this term more and more with people when I speak to them. It's a bit like magic, really, because you think this thing that, so we've been doing all our lives, breathing and moving and exercising and feeling, we've been doing these things, we all think. But in fact, we haven't really. We've been kind of doing the very surface layer of that was necessary. We might avoid really sitting and actually, ever sitting down and being like, I don't know, someone's asked me a question. And we're so used to replying from the mind, from our belief and our story and our strategy, that we never really stop to go, but do I feel like this is something that I want? Or what does I feel like the answer to this be? Not what do I think the answer is? And this, these little and powerful techniques of feeling really can transform our experience of our everyday life, because we start to see that we haven't been being honest with the world about who we are and what we want and what we need and what we feel, because we have just been thinking our way through life, and actually and wondering often at this point where we're living that way, wondering why we aren't where we want to be, or we don't feel as good as we do. Our relationships aren't in the way that we'd like them to be, because in fact the kind of way in which we can connect with people through feeling and experiencing life and doing the things we enjoy through feeling, we've just disconnected ourselves from. So what I'm really hearing is you kind of reconnecting people back to feeling, so that their choices and decisions in life start to come back to themselves and what they actually want, and not just this thinking mind that's, for want of a better word, trying to keep us safe in many ways, and avoiding certain harms that we don't want, or putting us into certain harms that we're familiar with.
Yeah. I think on the whole, we don't realize how disconnected we actually are from our body in the day-to-day, just even in an interaction like this. So you and I are speaking, and on the whole, we're kind of speaking from the level of our heads, aren't we? And yet it's really interesting just to notice, like, in this moment now, as I'm speaking to David, can I feel my legs? Can I feel my belly? Am I breathing? Like we can find ourselves in this place where yeah, we're worried about, I'm speaking for myself, or I could be maybe worrying about, what's he going to ask me next? What should I say? Is this going to sound okay? Is it going to make sense? And while I'm doing that and I'm up here, I'm completely disconnected and therefore so much less available to David. If I can feel my body as I interact with you right now, if I can notice the flow of my own breath, then I am so much more available to be in relationship with you. And it's like, then I can lean into trust. Like, I can trust that if I'm in my heart and I'm in my body, the right things are going to come out of my lips anyway. It's when I'm kind of in my head and I'm disconnected from my body and my humanness that I'm all of a sudden so much less available to you. It's like, if I'm worrying about what to say, or I'm worrying about pausing or getting it wrong, or stuttering, or a noise happening in the house, then all of a sudden my fear of disconnection is being brought into this room. My fear of rejection and abandonment. It's so much bigger, isn't it, than just this and us. It's everything that I'm bringing with me into this place. And if I can honor that, and I can honor and notice it in my body, then I don't get pushed around by it. And actually, I can enjoy you and enjoy this conversation, rather than it just feeling like a job or a thing to do. And for me, learning to be in my body and learning to breathe, and I have to do it every now and again. I have to kind of just go, right, you feel, are you practicing what you preach? Can you feel your belly right now? Okay, yeah, good. And sometimes I might put my hand on my belly, and just to kind of like reaffirm that. I might just take a breath, give myself that permission again to be a human being, to be fallible and imperfect, in order to be in my body and be present. And that feels so important to me and so liberating.
I like what you said there about we bring this whole story of our lives into every interaction that we're in. It's almost like we're all wearing, and this is a terrible analogy, people, but this is what's come to me, so I'm going to keep going with it. It's like we've got this like very long wedding dress, the long trail behind us, and it's got a whole life like along it, and we're carrying it around. And every time we meet someone, not even new, every interaction we have, it's like our mind is searching back into that and going, okay, is there anything from there I need to be afraid of or concerned or worry about in this moment? And we'll pick out like, oh God, there was one time for my side, it might be, there was this one time I was in a podcast and I didn't know what to ask someone, or I didn't have any answers. And then my whole energy goes into resolving those thoughts. How can I resolve those thoughts? Okay, maybe I need to think some more. And all these things disconnect me from being in this moment with you. Mm-hmm. But if I can come home and let go of the thinking, or come home to my body and being like, oh yeah, I've got a little bit of nervousness in my body now. Mm-hmm. Because, I don't need to know because, but it just exists in me right now. And be okay with that. That is a feeling that I can have in my body, and also feel safe that feeling can be there, and I can still be in this conversation. I can still have a wonderful conversation and enjoy this conversation. I don't need to be completely consumed by this past thing that may have happened. It can just live there and exist while I can continue enjoying this conversation. I don't have to, a lot of the men I work with get really sucked into overthinking. And I don't know where someone said, I was maybe on some program recently, I don't know, I heard this, and someone's like, when we stuck in overthinking, it's because there's a feeling that we want to avoid feeling. And we overthink to avoid ourselves coming back to the feeling. And I'm stuck by what you said. It's like, if I'm overthinking about something that's happened in the past, or a concern I have, I'm avoiding the feeling of nervousness that's in this moment now. But if I can just allow myself to feel that feeling of feeling nervous, maybe it's in my stomach, maybe it's in my chest, and I can just be okay with that, I can stay in connection with you. And the nervousness can be there, but I can still move forward and enjoy this conversation and be in connection.
Yeah, and even better, it's like you get to have company with it too. Like when you feel it, and and you kind of almost like bless its existence. It's like, do you know what? Like it's okay. It's welcome. It's really like, you know, who made nerves back? You know, like we're alive. It's part of being a vibrant, alive human being. And so what if we could have company with this feeling that maybe we would have historically associated with something uncomfortable or bad? So even to like bust ourselves and share it, like, oh, I don't know what's going on, but I'm really nervous. Or, you know, like even saying it, like we take the power out of it and we get to have company. And I think just that's really, really beautiful, just to sort of be together, like with whatever's present with us. Because then when we do that, yeah, we notice the fluid nature of ourselves. Like if I notice my nerves and I share it with you, if I notice maybe heat in my face or my neck, or feel a bit sweaty or my heart's pounding, like if I allow you to know me in this place, then I'm not only honoring my own process, I'm honoring you by staying present with you, rather than trying to fight it and trying to be perfect through fear of what you might think of me or whoever's listening.
And it's that, and then we put all our energy into trying to make sure that you don't spot what I'm feeling. We get into the thinking. It's like, how do I strategize? Okay, so I'm going a bit red. Let me put up my t-shirt a little bit so he doesn't see. And maybe I'll just, act like I'm talking the same as I know. Maybe I'll take some water. And we get into all this strategizing to avoid the having to be what we're feeling and mention it to somebody else. And I think it's really important to note that so many of the people that we often look up to and we love to speak to and hear from are people who would readily share what they are feeling in this moment. And I often speak to men, I speak to the men I speak to, they're like, oh, I really wish I could be like X person, he's really shares what he's feeling, blah, blah, blah. I really wish I could be that, courageous or brave. And I often reply with, well, what are you feeling right now? Can you tell me that? That's a really good place to start, because that's all it really takes, this leap of courage. But it's really it's like a transformational act to feel and communicate, and to continue to feel and communicate, because there's like a building of self-trust, like, oh, I can trust myself. I have courage. I have all these things that we often search for outside of ourselves, but actually they already exist in me. I just have to give them an opportunity to be expressed.
Yeah, and it's courageous, isn't it? Like it's courageous to bring our most authentic self into the world. It's a big risk, isn't it? But it's like, it's worth it. It's worth the risk. It's like the beauty of real authentic connection is worth the risk of being known in all of our humanness. Like that kind of brings us back into that thing of like, what's important? It's relationship, it's connection, and it's how connected we are to our body, how present we are. Like it's all so beautifully kind of connected and woven.
And he's speaking about presence there and before, and I'm often surprised how simple, and magical it can be, where you spend time with someone and they're just really present with you. Like we're often, and I say we, and I say this in my work as a coach and also as working with men, is looking for, I want to, when we talk about relationship, it's like, I want my partner to feel safe, and I want my partner to, open up to me and all these things. And I often say, but are you present? And people go, yeah, I'm present. And I go, so when you're talking, are you breathing nice and slow? Are you looking them in the eye? Could you repeat back to them, maybe not word for word, but, as a general theme, what they've said to you? Or are you fixated on your story of what you think they're saying and what it means about you? And they're often like, well, I'm not bad. And then I have to do exercises, and it comes back to, we spend so much time. It's as if there's like a battle sometimes, between our mind's desire to have certainty and understanding, through story creation and pattern matching, versus the body's desire for experience of the moment and what's there. Yeah, that wasn't a particularly well thought. It was just that really came to me in those moments. What's your thoughts on what I just said there?
I think that, I really feel like we owe it to the world to bring our body along. Like to our partner, to whoever it is that we're in connection with. I just feel like we owe it to them. There's just like this sense of bringing our fullness, and it's just when you sort of spoke about safety, like when if we're bringing our full body to our partner, then if we can, whatever's kind of present with us, if we bring it, rather than trying to sort of contain it or control it, I think that's where we bring or encourage safety. So kind of like if I'm, I don't know, like, so for me, like anger was something that maybe I never felt particularly comfortable with. So I would feel it for sure. Like I would feel its existence in my belly, and I deny it at an intellectual level. I'm not angry, it's fine, it's nothing. And I would contain it and contract against it. And then wonder why I was still energetically impacting people. And it was because I was being inauthentic. I was not fully allowing and fully feeling and fully bringing my body to the party. So just bringing like a version of myself into connection that was, I thought, disconnected, but it wasn't, because essentially we're deeply feeling beings. Like we're so much more sensitive than we ever kind of like would like to believe. So when someone's angry, they're angry. We can feel it. Even if they're an expert at pretending that they're not, we're almost bowled over by the energetics of it. The resonance of feeling that tension in someone's belly, we feel it. We might not know what it is unless we've explored it or been taught about it, but we feel it. We feel someone's energy. So again, it's like it's so important to just encourage people to be in their body and to bring it into relationship.
We spend, especially anger. Anger is one of those emotions, especially I see in men, that we want to avoid feeling. We don't even acknowledge that we feel angry a lot of the time. We'll use all sorts of other words: frustrated, irritated, annoyed, sad even. There's all these other, because they're more acceptable than a man being angry, because we live in a world where angry men have done many terrible things. But actually, that anger that we hide, as you're saying, is that it's still impacting other people. People still feel it. They might feel, and they may even feel worse, because they might feel unsafe, because they're like they might hear someone say, "Oh, I'm feeling a bit sad," but the other person feels like, "Nah, there's something else here." And this leaves me in this space of like, this space doesn't feel safe for me to be in for some reason. I don't know why, but I feel like I need to get away, or I feel nervous, or I stay because I just someone might freeze a little bit in those moments. But in fact, acknowledging that feeling of anger in that moment and being like, this is what I'm really feeling, or at least acknowledging it to yourself, actually creates a far safer place for people to be in and around you.
Yeah, and I also think there's a big confusion between anger and aggression. I think anger is a healthy, clean emotion, something that we shouldn't deny, and it's okay to kind of cultivate, because we can utilize it. Like, it propels us forward, and when we speak it cleanly and with an intention of love, it actually brings us closer. When we don't speak it, we become resentful and we separate. When we say anger, people think aggression generally. And aggression is like an outward attack or an inward attack, where there's intent, there's damage, there's violence. Very, very different energies. And I think to cultivate anger and to be able to cleanly express it is very, very important for men and women. It's really, it's if you genuinely want to experience the fullness of life, like the fullness of joy, you have to be prepared to experience the fullness of anger. It's just expression. It's just you acknowledging what's present and alive for you. And it's absolutely okay. You just need to just, as a man, it's our responsibility to check in with it and to learn how to express it and move it through us cleanly. It's our responsibility to do that so that it then doesn't turn into aggression, or we don't channel it into aggression. I think for me, that was a big lesson. I absolutely denied any anger in me. I wouldn't bring it anywhere into the world. And I think I suffered as a result of that. Like, it was almost, I think for me, it was like I didn't feel entitled to be angry. Like, who are you to be angry about something? So I just denied its existence. I didn't like it. I didn't like aggressive men. I didn't want to be an aggressive man. So again, I denied anger. And somebody once told me that when we suppress or contain our anger, it's almost as if we're walking around the world like with a kink in our life force hosepipe. That we've just got this, we're just stunting the flow of energy through us. And it impacts our confidence and how we stand and how we show up in the world. And I really, really resonated with that. I was like, wow, yeah, I'm definitely got a kink in my hosepipe right now. And I then was inspired to learn about anger and learn how to be with it and to befriend it and learn how to utilize it safely. And it's a very big part of my personal practice now is to cultivate it and be with it and utilize it to propel me forwards in the world.
Yeah, it's a really good distinction you said there. It's like anger and aggression. We've kind of collapsed those things together and just called it anger, when we see, and I guess it's almost been, people have done things in the name of aggression or rage and labeled it as I'm just angry, which has left us all with this fear about the word anger, or seeing anyone who appears to be angry or appears to be angry, quote unquote, appears to be angry, because we just think, anger is aggression, anger is rage. That means, and it's out of control as well. What I'm hearing there is creating controlled ways to release and express anger, as well as being with it, being angry and allowing it to be one of the emotions that we're open to feeling and expressing.
I think bad things happen to us, like shit things happen, and we're entitled to feel angry about it. And in fact, if we don't, we're almost dismissing ourselves. Like we're perpetuating our stuckness by not allowing ourselves to feel or express anger.
Because we often think, other people have got it worse off, than me. I just, whatever happened. But, there's people in the world and they don't have a home or whatever it may be. This is a sentiment I hear a lot in my coaching people. And I used to go, okay, yeah, true. And now I go, no. I'm like, no, we're not talking about those people. We're talking about you.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about those things happening to you? Oh, no, but, people got to have a worse. No. That's you bypassing what you're feeling so that you don't have to experience the feeling. So how do you feel about that thing that's happened, that your loss, the thing that didn't happen, or the person that crossed your boundaries? And just giving some space for that feeling before we move on to it could, other people have got it worse. Because, if we keep doing that, then we just have a lot of this unexpressed anger in the world, which we have a lot of already. But, we don't need to add to that pile, or that bucket of unexpressed anger in each person and in the world in general. And I'm interested in, like, what do you see in your clients after you've worked with them for a while, after you've brought in the embodiment and the breath as well as the psychotherapy, what are some of the shifts that you see in people that really stand out to you?
I think one of the main shifts that I notice is just this real sense of vitality. You know, like this, that comes with a connected head, heart, and soul. You know, I think that when people come home into their body, like it exponentially changes their life. Like the joy that they have denied or of not being able to express, that comes from actually living in your body, it's just like it's visible. You know, I think if we don't feel at home or safe in our own skin, we don't feel at home or safe anywhere. Like we have to start there. And when people can find peace and serenity and joy in their own body, it's just life-changing. You know, like we grow up and we almost have like a mistrust. Things happen to us. You know, maybe we were angry, maybe we were shamed for our sexual energy, and in some way we learned to deny it or disconnect from it. And again, like jump ship, leave our body. When I see people who have kind of come home to their body, like they just find joy in the simple things. They find joy in movement. They find joy in breath. They're much, much more likely to feel into purpose because they trust it, because they can believe, they feel that it's right. You know, I feel that relationships deepen because the relationship to self is initially focused on. You know, like it's just that sense of like when somebody feels enough and feels home and whole, they don't need someone else to make them feel okay, so that their relationship looks like this rather than like that kind of sticky enmeshment that so many people kind of find themselves in. So I think when you see somebody in their fullness, in all of their vitality, with their energy moving and flowing through them, and how fluid they are, how they stand, how deeply they breathe, the brightness in their eyes, like how they dance, how they move, it's like all connected to pain and lack of, or having the ability to move this stuff through your body. When somebody has a practice, when somebody's done that work, you can see it. You can feel it when they walk into a room. There's just this, I keep coming back to the word fluid, but there's just this natural fluidity that is just so obvious and noticeable. Just like they've almost kind of come back to life.
Yeah. And that's definitely an experience I've seen in people, and it's, you know, I find my mind going back to when we were on retreat a few weeks ago. You know, over the course of 4 or 5 days, as men come home to their bodies and they move and they, you know, it's like ice has melted away.
Yeah, and it literally has. You know, like the literal physical armoring of muscle and fascia has softened and opened, and you know, just how they move, how they dance. You know, like that rigidity turns to just softness and joy. And you see them smile and actually enjoy movement and enjoy dance. Like that's huge. I think I know we've had this discussion before, but I hated dancing. I hated it. And I was so convinced I would have, like, I can't dance, can't do it. It's not me, can't do it. Everyone else can, but I can't, and I'm not going to. And you know, countless social interactions where I would sit at the table like the kind of grumpy man who's like, no, go on, you do it, I'm fine, I don't want to. And I just didn't appreciate how my unresolved pain impacted my physical body, impacted my ability to move. I was so tightly wound and contained. Like I couldn't have danced. Of course I was uncoordinated. Of course I couldn't fluidly flow and move, because I was constantly trying to control the way I showed up in the world. Like, if I softened and surrendered, what would come up? Like, what would I'd cry, or I'd get angry, or no, don't do that. But it wasn't conscious, but my body was just so fearful of being abandoned that it was just like, you got to stay so tightly controlled. And then having the gift of being in my body, of breathing, of moving, I all of a sudden discovered, I actually really like music. Like, I always used to listen to podcasts, and I would tell myself, I'm just learning. I just love what I do, and I want to learn about it. Don't listen to music because I haven't got time. And when I started to sort of like essentially de-armor myself, all of a sudden I had an appetite for music again. And I had an appetite for movement and dance, which is just incredible. And I think that's one of the big things that we see on Men Without Masks retreats, is that kind of initial stiffness and rigidity, which is very quickly replaced with just like flow and fun and laughter, and seeing people smile when their body is open and they're breathing fully, and how alive they become. It's fucking beautiful.
Yeah, no, it is. And you see that, like I said, the softening of the muscles, and the smile comes, and they start opening up, and they start sharing, and they start laughing more, and they connect with people more, and it just becomes this. And all of this happens in Men Without Masks over the course of 5 days. But one of the things that also really strikes me that I see as well is confidence. You see confidence. You see, as the body relaxes, as the smile comes, the sadness might melt away, the lack of the tenseness dissolves. The confidence has a space to come into. And I say this because a lot of people talk about wanting to be more confident. And every single, every single man on Men Without Masks I see is like, when all the body has a chance to come to the party, this innate confidence comes with it. This real presence, this real confidence in being present and being in their skin and being themselves comes through as well.
Yeah, because like your body's got your back. Like your body is your best friend, your everything. It's like, it's got you. And it's just remembering that and just trusting it. Like, just trusting in the intelligence of your body and giving your brain a rest. Give your mind a rest and come home, drop into your body and see what magic it's capable of.
That's a beautiful sentiment. The beautiful sentiment to close out, because I know time has run away, as always does, and we get talking. Matt, thank you for such a engrossing conversation, and really giving us a picture into your world and the work that you do, the wonderful work that you do. And I'm sure the listeners are wondering where they can find out more about you, where you're writing or speaking, or how they can work with you.
Yeah, thank you. You can find me on my website, which is mattgunn.co.uk. I very occasionally drop into Instagram. So I'm on Instagram as Matt D. Gunn, although I'm making a concerted effort to try to be more present there. So watch this space. I'm working with Men Without Masks, so you can come and join us on a 5-day retreat. Working closely at the moment also with biodynamic breathwork. So there's a few retreats that I'm going to be assisting on next year. Please feel free to contact me about any of that. That's probably kind of like the best way to find me, I think, at the moment.
It's good. I'm looking forward to seeing you on Instagram a little bit more.
I might need an accountability buddy, maybe.
Or you can check in with me weekly in your weekly posts.
There we
go. But yeah, listeners, if you've enjoyed the episode, or if you've taken anything that you really implement into your own life, maybe you realize that you know, your body could do a bit more movement or sound or breath. You know, I'm sure me and Matt would love to hear from you about how that goes and what you've taken away. It's always beautiful to hear from people when they tell us, you know, what they've learned, what they've taken away, because really that's why we do what we do, to make a difference in people's lives. So please feel free to get in contact. All the links to what Matt mentioned will be in the show notes below. But, you know, until next week, I'd like to say thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you.